The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism-Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy.
And I'm Shannon.
And you've got your Valentine's red on today, I see.
I've been wearing red all week, as much as I could possibly muster.
Great.
This is my sparkly red. It doesn't look that fancy on camera, but it's my sparkly red shirt.
No, it looks very fancy, very sparkly.
But I'm glad you brought up Valentine's, because I wanted to say happy Valentine's to you. You know, I was saying yesterday that the world tries to make this a romantic holiday, and I say pshaw to that. I think that Valentine's Day is about love, and that love comes in many different shapes, sizes, and varieties. And I think it's a wonderful day to celebrate self-love.
Yes.
I think it's a great day to celebrate love for all the people who are meaningful to us in our lives. And so I just want to say happy Valentine's Day to you, Nancy. I love you. We've been friends now for almost 10 years.
Wow.
Which is amazing, right? And I just appreciate that, you know, there have been many blessings that have come to me in the last 10 years, and you certainly have been a big one. And getting to know you and your family, I'm forever changed for it. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, Shannon. And I feel the same way about you. You're a blessing in my life.
Well, it's just such a privilege to be here with you and to be with these wonderful people that are tuning in right now. I want to remind everybody that we're live for the next hour. You got a great guest coming up for you after we do In the News. And we're live on the big four. I refer to them as YouTube, Twitter, Periscope, and Facebook Live. Mm-hmm. And you can participate right now. In fact, we're saying good morning to Ivani, and we're saying good morning to KK. We're going to answer your question in just a minute, because our expert's going to be talking about exactly what your question is. But we welcome everybody that's on those big four that are watching, but we are also live on a bunch more platforms. Because Traven, our producer, is so amazing. We want to spread some Valentine love on him. And you can see, I don't even know what D Live is, but I'm glad we're there live. And I hope that if you're watching, you want to participate and write into us. Now, if you're watching us recorded, as we podcast to different podcast servers, we're pretty much anywhere that you can find a podcast and we are a free download on all of those places. That's one of the requirements that we have. So take a look at some of the places that Traven is showing you. But if you like podcasts, go to your podcast, the place where you get your podcast, and look for Autism Live. If you don't see us, please alert us immediately, because we want to be there. But we think that we're in pretty much all of them. So prove me wrong. Let us know what we're missing out on. And we appreciate you writing in. If you're watching in podcast, you can still participate. You go to autism-live.com and write in where it says chat, and then we're able to see that. It's not in real time that we're able to see it, but we're able to see it later on. We also have a Facebook page. We love it when you guys like us, review us, follow us, share us. We appreciate all of that. So we've got some news to cover today. And then a little bit later, we're going to have Vince Redmond, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist. He's going to be joining us. He's a regular here on the show. We absolutely adore him. And we asked him today, because last week, we were thinking we had him last week, and last week, the topic of the week was levels of friendship. Because I don't know about you, Nancy, but I really didn't understand this until they were teaching it to my son on the autism spectrum. That I never really thought about the fact that you have different levels of friendship, and there are different rules under different levels of friendship, and that it's kind of fluid, that somebody can be in one level of friendship and something can happen and they get moved to a different one. So Vince is going to be with us in just a little while to talk about how we teach that to kids on the spectrum, but how we live and model that as people in our children's lives. And anybody who's an adult, whether you have a child or not, this is really important stuff. I struggle with this, Nancy. Do you struggle with this?
With understanding the different levels?
Well, and the emotions that come with it. I remember very distinctly when my son was in second grade, there was a little boy who my son just loved, and he followed around everywhere, and he was like, I'm Michael's friend and I want to be Michael's friend. But then I would get these reports from his aide that Michael had hit him, that Michael had kicked him. And I was like, what is happening? And then finally the report came home from the aides that said that Michael chased him down on the playground, took the little ties to his hood, because it was this type of weather, and pulled them tight and then wrapped them around his neck and was choking him with them by the time the aide caught up.
Right.
And so they had to sit my son down and say to him, okay, if a friend is hurting you, your first step is that you have to say, somehow communicate to them, stop, you're hurting me. Because sometimes the friend doesn't know that they're hurting you. So you need to be clear, and you need to say to them, stop, you're hurting me. And if you've been clear and said, stop, you're hurting me to your friend, and they continue doing what you just said was hurting you, then they're not your friend. And I remember them teaching this to my son, and I was like, I don't think I live that. I don't think that I apply that to people in my life, that, that I'm clear when somebody's doing something that's hurting me and say, you're doing this and it's hurting me. And I for sure don't realize, oh, that's not my friend when they keep doing it. I sit there and go, why do they keep doing that? Right? And it was I was in my 40s at that point, and it was very eye-opening to me, because nobody had ever taught me that. Is that something that you were walking through your life and knew, Nancy?
No, I didn't know it. And Wyatt used to be drawn to the bullies at school. He wanted so badly to interact with them that he would, what we call silly talk nonsense to them and risk being made fun of. But he wanted to engage with them. And so at his school, they had what was called red flag people. And there was one boy in particular that was a red flag that Wyatt was supposed to avoid. But it was like a moth to a flame. He was drawn to him.
Yeah. Well, and KK has, I think, hit the nail on the head here. KK said, hi, what should I do if someone makes fun of my disability as a boyfriend, but I still want to be with them? How to stop the bullying? And I think that this is what's key. When I heard the therapist saying to my son, if you say stop, you're hurting me, and they continue doing it, that they're not your friend. And you need to be aware of that, but that doesn't stop the desire to want them to want to be your friend. That's the next layer of it. And that when we realize, okay, that person is hurting me, but I still want them to be nice to me, even though I'm realizing that is not what's on their agenda, it doesn't automatically make those feelings go away. So Vince is going to talk with us about all this and help us to get our heads on straight, because this is hard stuff.
Yeah.
This is really, really hard stuff. Hard for our kiddos, but I think hard for adults on and off the spectrum. It's like shades of gray, but this levels of friendship, I think, helps give us a clearer picture, and Vince is going to talk with us about that. But shall we launch into our news first?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. Our first.
You got it?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. The first story is exciting news that Harvard researchers have unveiled a new technology to investigate autism. And Shannon, this is a pretty dense article. I don't know whether you can untangle the way that this technology works.
Well, it's funny because the thing that I was starting to say was our first story is pretty dense.
Yes.
That was exactly the wording that I was going to give. And I read this last night, and you know me, I just barely get a gripster on it. It's like watching a Christopher Nolan movie. Like
Right.
I sort of understand it, and then it slips away from me, and then I sort of understand it, and then it slips away from me again. I think what the takeaway is that it sounds like to me what they're doing is reverse engineering and going, look, we know that something happens genetically with autism. We know that there's a mutation. We know that there's a cascade of events that lead to autism. So what if we work backwards and take the cascade and try to follow it back to a gene expression and to see what happens, and then move it forward again and say, if we know all these genes now, but if we take a gene and if we mutate it, let's see what it cascades into. So you're looking at it forward and backward. That's what I got from it. And that they see that this is being very effective in mouse models, that they're seeing how just changing one gene has a cascade that creates one thing, and then another gene cascades to present a different outcome. And so from this, they're extrapolating that not only are they going to potentially find answers to autism, but they are also hopeful that they're going to find answers to cancer, autoimmune disease, and other genetic diseases. This excites me because wouldn't it be like the sweetest thing ever if autism research led to cures for other things like cancer?
Yes, it would.
Wouldn't that be just like an amazing thing for us to look back and go, look how we got here?
Exactly.
But in fact, what they're hoping to find is what the gene is that cascades to the more disabling aspects of autism, because then maybe there's a way that they can treat it and prevent the more disabling aspects of autism.
Right. So exciting. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good description, Shannon. That helps me put it in simplistic terms.
You don't think the people at Harvard and MIT are breaking out into hives at my
No, I don't think so.
I think.
Yeah, so exciting news. So we'll have to keep following that.
Yes.
And the next story we have is about another study that's been done that youth with autism see a sharp decline in physical activity between the ages of 9 and 13 compared with neurotypical kids.
Yeah. And I don't know about you. You know how I always say on the show, sometimes they'll bring up research and I go, well, that's a big duh.
Right.
Like, I think we could have guessed this, but I do appreciate now, after all these years, what this kind of research amounts to, like how it helps to change the world. Because you can say to a parent, listen, we looked at a lot of kids on the autism spectrum, and we see that, if you do early intervention and then you get to a certain age and your kid is going to become sedentary because they're going to get really drawn into video games. So you really got to be mindful between this age and get them moving and, let them play their video games, but every once in a while take a break and like really program it in, because it's going to help them with anxiety. It's going to help them with self-regulation, and it's going to help them to, build core strength, which leads to all these other things, right? We can say that to parents all the time, but, it's a little bit more robust, I think, if that's the right word to use, when we hear, a study has shown that, yes, across the board, these kids get less, and that this is part of what separates them in these ages of development, and we really have to stem the tide of it. I just think it adds some more credence to it. What do you think?
Yes. It adds more credence, and they're saying, they're kind of pinpointing that it's between the ages of 9 and 13. So we know when to kind of be aware that that's when the level of activity starts to drop. And compared to neurotypical kids, they did far less activity. So at 13, youth with autism reported only 1 or 2 days of moderate to vigorous physical activity, compared with 9 or more days with neurotypical kids. So that's quite a difference.
And help me if I'm wrong on this, because you're somebody, Nancy, who has always, you're an athlete. you've run marathons. You've been somebody who competitively jumped horses. I mean, you're an amazing horsewoman. I think you have had an understanding of your body and have always been big on exercising. You hike on a regular basis still. Right. And I know you have said to me that if you don't get an opportunity to move your body, that your life doesn't work as well.
No, it doesn't. It clears my brain. And I think for our kids on the spectrum, it's really important because what it does is those endorphins that get released when you exercise, it's a really great way to beat stress. And let's face it, our kids have a lot of stress and anxiety.
Yeah. And I'm not somebody who's an athlete. I've had periods of time where I exercised. Was that Wyatt that just went by? I didn't see.
No, it was John, his aide.
Oh, hello, John. But I'm not somebody who's particularly good at that kind of stuff. And so, hi, John. We need to have you sign a release. But anyway, I have periods of time in my life where I'll get on an exercise kick and I'll be doing something like swimming or, dance aerobics I really love. And then I don't stick to it, But I have really seen in COVID that it's really forced me to hone in and look. And we put a treadmill in the living room because if I don't get on that treadmill on a regular basis, my fibromyalgia acts up. My thinking becomes really circuitous. Mm-hmm. I have more anxiety, like free-floating anxiety. And I find if I just do even a small amount on the treadmill, like not crazy, I'm not running any marathons, but a small amount on the treadmill helps me to focus. I have seen that it helps everybody in my household, including my son. And I keep thinking about Temple Grandin saying that, she had to be on medication for anxiety for a lot of years, but then she discovered that if every day she did a burst of activity, not even like, exercise for a half an hour, but if there was like a 3-minute period of time where she got breathless, and she said, I do it in a hotel, I can do jumping jacks, I can do, squat thrusts, different things, but if a burst of activity to get me winded, that keeps her regulated. Mm-hmm. And I when you think about all the hormonal changes that are going through a 9 to a 13-year-old's body, I just think it really becomes important for us to recognize this research and make a concerted effort that between those ages to up the exercise level.
Yeah, and Shannon, they said that the decline continues through the teenage years. At 17 to 18, most adolescents with autism participated in 0 days of physical activity compared to 6 to 8 days among youth without autism. That's statistically a big difference. And it shows you that between the ages of 9 and 13, we first see that drop off, and that becomes a habit, unfortunately. Whereas if you exercise regularly, that becomes a habit.
And I'm sure, and this is maybe something we can ask, because we have people come on every month to talk about research, and maybe we'll put it in their hopper to talk about the research showing physical exercise and how that correlates to depression and anxiety. Because I really feel like there is a correlation there. Hey, we're saying hi to Jordan, who's watching and finding this a helpful discussion. Jordan, we're so glad that you're here with us. I just wanted to say hello. And I didn't say hello to Nasser or Amanda, so we're saying hi to them as well.
Shannon,
reminding everybody, you can write in the chat. Yes?
I also wondered on this particular study whether kids with autism don't take part in school athletics as much as neurotypical kids. And my hunch is that they don't.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, Nancy. And I was talking to somebody recently. I'm always reminded, we do our jargon of the day, Mondays and Thursdays here on the show, but I'm always reminded of the fact that I've gone to the dark side and I just throw jargon terms out and forget that everybody and I was talking about APE the other day and I was like, APE this and APE this to somebody. And they were like, what are you talking about? And I said, APE stands for Adaptive Physical Education. And, if your child has an IEP, you can request that they get an evaluation to see if they qualify for APE. And then another person was saying, my child gets APE, but another person said, my child gets both APE and the regular phys ed. They do both of them. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. And then it became this conversation about, wait a second, there were people who were like, my child isn't participating at all. So it just reminds me how important it is, A, that we talk to our support groups and that we talk about what are we getting and what's appropriate, although it's going to be different for every individual. But our kids need to move. That's the bottom line. Our kids need to move, and they need a lot of exercise. The more that they are physically moving their body, we know, for instance, that activities that cross the midline, so things like playing tennis or a ping pong or something like that, or even just touching your toes with the opposite hand, that kids across the board, on the spectrum and not on the spectrum, test higher cognitively after doing crossing the midline activities. And if you want to know more about that, I encourage people to go to Pinterest. We have a board on Pinterest for Autism-Live, and we have different categories, and one of them is just crossing the midline exercises, and they have games you can play with your kiddos to cross the midline. So all of this we know is connected, mind, body, right? So the body's got to move.
Right. And especially during this time when so many of our kids are virtual learning, it's important to build in physical activities in their schedule during the day.
Yes. Used to be that we would give our kids a break and let them have technology. Like, okay, you can have your phone or your iPad for 10 minutes because you're on a break, right? At least that was what we did. And now it's got to be the exact opposite. You've been on the computer for half an hour, 40 minutes, an hour. I hope not longer than that. Now, it's a break in the school thing. It's not the time to sit down and play on your phone or your iPad. It's time to get up and run, like let's play chase around the house. Put one kid in the laundry basket and have laundry basket races so that they blow their yayas out so that they can come back to the screen. You can have a break for technology, like way later, right before dinner or something. But you gotta, if you're doing distance learning, you gotta take the breaks and make them physical. Do it with your kids. Let's all get in better shape.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so I'm glad that we talked about that. We have one more story that is a heartbreaker.
Yes, a really sad story. A Tennessee mom is begging for a miracle after her son, who is a well-known autism advocate for anti-bullying and autism awareness, was in a car accident. Actually, I don't know if it was a car accident. I think he fell.
He fell from a truck. He fell.
Right, and he's in a medically induced coma. Chris Miller, and he's better known as Captain Spectrum, right, Shannon?
Yes, and this is heartbreaking to all of us. I know that yesterday the update was, just bless this mom's heart. The update was doctors were saying that they weren't getting any brain waves upon scan, and they were prepared to declare him brain dead. And mom said, no, wait, because he still has medicines in his body from the medically induced coma. You've got to let that clear before you can test him again, before you can declare him brain dead. But we want to tell people that this family, if you're of the praying ilk, if that's something you do, like, please include this family in your prayers. This is just devastating to hear this story. They also have a Facebook site that people can go to, and I had it up and now I don't. But there is a Facebook site that you can go to where you can get updates about him. And there's also a place where if you'd like to make a donation to the family for his care, and because his mother and I believe his aunt have moved to be closer to the hospital. I can tell you because I have a family member in the hospital who's been in the hospital, and this pandemic is so devastating in so many ways. And I know that many of you have family members that are ill, or you've lost family members. But I also want to say that having a family member who does not have COVID, but is sick during this time and in the hospital it's just horrifying, because you can't go see them. You can't provide the mental support. Imagine for a moment, you guys, that this is your child and that they're in a medically induced coma and you're not able to just sit by their bedside the whole day. what this must be like for the family. But we do want to tell people that, so the website is, or the Facebook site is Prayers for Christopher Ryan Paul Miller. And if you go there, there is a place there where if you'd like to make a donation of any size that you can, again, that is Prayers for Christopher Ryan Paul Miller. And you can give your loving thoughts, or you can, we have a thing that says starting at $1.99. That's a GoDaddy ad that has nothing to do with anything. Disregard that. But there is a place if you can make a donation of any size to Christopher and his family. We are sending them love and prayers and hoping that for the very best for this young man, and that he is able to come out of this. Devastating though, right, Nancy?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think, do we have Vince yet? We do. Vince has just arrived. We're so thrilled that you're there, Vince. This is Vince Redmond. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and he's joining Nancy and I. He joins us regularly once a month to be here with us to talk about different topics. And today we asked Vince to talk about levels of friendship, how we teach this to our kids, why it's important that we teach this to our kids, and how we learn and model this ourselves. Now, Vince, we had a question that came in that I think goes directly to this. Okay. Kate wants to know, hi, what should I do if someone makes fun of my disability as a boyfriend, but I still want to be with them? How do we stop the bullying? And I think this goes right to the heart of why this is so hard, because we can understand, like, we have a relationship with somebody and we've already defined it. This is my friend, or this is my boyfriend. And then they do something that is, you know, making fun of the disability is not appropriate, right? And how do we then take that and translate into, is this the person that should be in my life? How do we communicate that? How do we decide when it's time to let go of somebody? Because I think we all have people in our lives that are, you know, not always our best,
not always
the best to be a friend to us, right?
Right. Well, that's a lot.
It is a lot. Welcome, Vince.
Good morning
Welcome.
to you and to everyone. Now my head's spinning. There's like 8 questions there.
Yes.
I think that when we're looking at friendships, that's always you kind of backpedal a little bit to oftentimes, you know, individuals on the spectrum, so children to teens to young adults, have difficulties understanding social communication, social nuances, social skills in general. So we want to see every situation differently, right? So given the situation that's the message about bullying and making fun of, I'm not sure if it was from someone in the relationship or someone outside the relationship making fun of a boyfriend.
It's a boyfriend.
Yeah.
It's a boyfriend.
Making fun of the girlfriend.
Right. Right.
Correct?
And she wants to stay in the relationship, but wants to know how to handle this issue of him making fun of her disability.
Right. So the first thing is let's make sure that everyone's understanding of what's going on. So my first recommendation would be for the girlfriend to have a sit down with the boyfriend and say, what did you mean when you said whatever, right? Or what was meant by this action? So then this way the boyfriend has the opportunity to, he's going to do one of 2 things. He's going to explain, maybe it was a misunderstanding, and explain what he meant in a low stress environment where he's able to articulate what he means. Or 2, he's going to realize he's not being appropriate, he's not being careful, you know, and thoughtful and compassionate. And that gives him the opportunity to apologize and say, you know, I was a jerk. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. And now we can have a conversation on how that hurts her by hearing that from someone that's you know, one of the most closest people to her, right? And how she felt that was a violation of their relationship. So I think the first thing to make sure is to let's sit down and make sure that the way we're feeling and the way we're interpreting things is what was meant by the speaker. And then if it was, then that speaker or the boyfriend in this situation has the opportunity to realize he was being a jerk, and he needs to make up for that.
Yeah. I think, both of these aspects are really important, and Nancy, jump in wherever you want to, but I think sometimes we forget that communication piece, that it is important to go back and go, okay, so for instance, like you said, what did you mean? I have a friend who I love, that when something happens, like, sometimes you're with a bunch of people and there's like something needly gets said, and her expression is, she goes, "What just happened?" It's like this crazy, what just happened? And while everybody's still standing there, what just happened? And then, sometimes somebody will go, "What do you mean?" And she'll go, "Well, that thing that you just said, what was that?" And then it's all out in the open, right? And then the person has an opportunity to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm crabby, and that was inappropriate. I should not have said that." Like, it really raises the level of the conversation, and I think raises the level of the friendships. Sometimes, though, we just assume, well, that person is hurting me and wanting to hurt me, and then we start to shut down, and then the relationship starts to deteriorate. So that communication piece is important. But Vince, what about when you communicate to somebody and they double down on they're like, "Well, I get to say what I want to say, and if it hurts your feelings, that's just your problem."
Mm-hmm. And those are people we don't want to be around. Right? If people are going to be mean to you, regardless of who they are, these aren't people we want in our lives. So if someone's doubling down and saying, "Well, I'm just a jerk and I'm going to be mean to you, take it or leave it," leave it.
But
Right?
I think that is one of the hardest lessons. And I don't know if it's hard for men and women, but I think most of the women I know, this is really hard, is that, like, sometimes if we like the person, we don't want to know. We don't want to, like, it's almost like we don't want to communicate to say, "Hey, I need for you to stop doing that," for them, because then they keep doing it. And then it's like, we're 100% sure they're not into us. It's like that book, "He's Just Not Into You."
Mm-hmm.
Nancy, have you experienced this in your life, where it's like you like the person and you just keep wanting it to get better, but they're showing all the signs that they're not treating you well?
Yeah. I think sometimes it's difficult, as you say, particularly for women, to give up and, take the social cues and the other cues that this person doesn't want to have a relationship with you. And oftentimes, like I was saying with Wyatt, with that particular bully, he seemed to be almost more attracted to try harder to get the attention and get the relationship and to, foster a relationship.
And I think I personally have been guilty of that in my life. Earlier, Vince, we talked just briefly about this, and I said that when Jem was little and the therapist, there was a kid who was bullying him on the playground, and the therapist said, "Okay, we're going to work on levels of friendship." And he explained, that you have a best friend, and then you have friends, and you have acquaintances, and you have people you don't know, and you have, first responders who are people you don't know, but you have different rules with them that you can go up and tell them things. And so they explained all this to him to the point where he got it. And then they said to him, "So when a friend is hurting you, that you have to convey to them, 'You're hurting me, please stop.'
Yes.
And then if that person continues to do it, then you have to understand that person is not your friend." And it's almost like picking them up out of that category and deciding, okay, which category do they go in? Do they go into acquaintance? Which means that we still speak to them, but we no longer trust them with our deepest things. And when they were explaining this to him, it was like somebody had pulled back the curtains, and I went, "Oh, I don't think I'm doing this in my life." I don't think that I have people, oh goodness me. It was so eye-opening to me. But so and then I go, "Oh, okay, I know this now." But for this young woman who's saying, "I really like this guy, I want to stay in a relationship with him, but it's making me feel bad that he is making fun of my disability." I love you saying, you got to sit down and make it clear. But the bad news is, if that once you've made it clear, if that person persists in doing it, then you got to take another look at it, right?
Right. And this all comes from a desire to want to be liked and our desire to want to be accepted. This is everybody, right? Individuals on the spectrum, individuals on the spectrum. We all have a very deep desire to be accepted and to be liked. And I think a lot of times we stay in these relationships because we feel that if we do something different, if we do something more, or we do something greater, then we will be accepted and liked. And we stay in these relationships because we want that attention and we want that affirmation. The problem is if it's, now again, there are, in every relationship, there's times where we have to be vocal and there's times we're going to get hurt, but we know when someone's continuing to do it all the time versus having good conversations. You heard someone, we sit down and we talk, what did you mean by that? What was said, and you break it down, and either the speaker or the boyfriend in this situation accepts responsibility and says, hey, I was a jerk, it was a bad day, I very much apologize. Or he says, well, if you get a lot of, that's just the way I am, then this isn't someone who's going to accept you. This is not someone who's going to give you positive attention. This is someone who wants to be chased. This is someone who wants you to chase after them. And this isn't healthy for us. So I think we have to look at that desire for attention. And like we said, if we're looking at circle of friends, we look within the circle of people we already know we can trust. We already know that will give us good attention, and let's spend more attention with them. It could be family, it could be certain friends, neighbors, people in Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and so forth. And then we get to this person now moves to the outer layer, which is now acquaintances and people that we know. And that's okay. People we know lots of people that are just people that we know, but yet we don't get as hurt by them because we're not trying to give them. Sorry,
you're very sought after gentleman.
Well, I thought it would stop after 3 rings, but by the 7th ring, it's not stopping. So we want to make sure that we increase the people in our inner rings of circle of friends. Now, if someone has to be, so-and-so, ejected out of that realm and move into an acquaintance one, that's okay. And hurt is okay, right? Hurt is a natural feeling. And I think some of the learning we have to do with individuals on the spectrum is teaching them that hurting is okay. It hurts, it's uncomfortable, we don't like it, and we try to avoid it, but for the greater good, it's okay. It's a very natural response because we cared for someone. We put effort, resource, time into someone. We liked being liked, right? But we want to make sure this is someone who's going to give us back, just as much as we're giving to them. And if they're not, then we have to look at, moving them outside of our close circle of friends.
So Jordan has written in and said a very interesting point here. Sometimes that friend just doesn't know how to behave. Sometimes I think it's just my lesson to look at it in a different perspective if you think he has some good intentions.
Right.
And I think that that's a really important point, especially when people are young or when people are having difficulty with something. We don't just throw people away. But we try to teach them, hey, we're in this friendship together, and we do need to take their perspective in taking it. But for me, this comes down to boundaries, Vince. Like, when is it too much?
Right. And again, I don't want to, in any way, I'm glad you brought that up, because as I'm thinking, I want to make sure everyone understands. I'm not saying let's abort relationships right away. The first time someone says something that was mean, or says something that hurt our feelings, by all means, no. We do want to get to know that person better. We want to have multiple conversations of sitting down and saying, am I understanding this correctly? What are you trying to say? What did you mean by that? Even if it's, happening on a regular basis, sit down, communicate, because that's how we get more information. That's how we will know if someone's intentions, as Jordan was saying, are pure and good, and we're just misinterpreting it, or they're good and they're just having a hard time right now because of X, Y, and Z reasons, right? It could be the pandemic or job or their own family or whatever, right? They might be having some problems, so they're having a hard time giving me what I want. But at least now we understand, and we're able to respect that and hold those boundaries. We'll be able to say, okay, I respect you in the situations you're in now, so I'm going to support you right now and help you through that, and then you can help me through my thing. And we establish boundaries like that. But when there is no good intentions that come out, and we continue to feel over time that my feelings continually get hurt, or I continually, am feeling sad and not fulfilled in the relationship, it's at that time we have to look at, is this relationship healthy or is it harmful?
Yeah, I know I have some friends who are adults on the autism spectrum that are just sometimes painfully honest.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that there are times when I've had the opportunity to get my feelings hurt by their being honest, but I think in getting to know them, I realized that they were coming from a pure place of not wanting to hurt my feelings, that the intent was in no way to hurt my feelings any more than, I always laugh. I went to visit one of our centers, and I was there very early in the morning, and I don't think I had all my makeup on that morning. But the little kids, they'll come up to you. This is pre-COVID. And twice within an hour, one little kid came up to me, and I was saying, hello, good morning. And he looked at me and he said, "You're old," right? And I immediately cracked up, and the person was like, "Oh, we don't say that." And I said to them, "Oh, it's fine. I am old. It's okay." And and I said, "Yes." And he said to me, "You look like my grandma." And I said, "Oh, your grandma must be beautiful." Right. And I didn't take any offense to it. Right. Because I knew it was coming from a place of pure love, and it just is. And there's no way to take offense from that. Then the next child came up to me and said, "You're fat." and it was like, well, but I have learned to look at that in a different perspective and to enjoy my friends who are on the spectrum, because I know they're not going to say something to me just, to make me feel better.
Yes, they're
Exactly.
brutally honest. Children are brutally honest as well. And a lot of individuals on the spectrum they don't have that filter necessarily.
Yeah,
it's those social norms I talked about, right? They don't understand the social norms, right? Like you were alluding to, Nancy. They don't know the game, right? They don't know you say these things to make them feel good, even if you don't feel it's true, right? I mean, you white lies and kind of the social appropriate responses that we give, right? You don't talk about age, there's like there's off limit conversations. You don't talk about age. You don't talk about weight. Our kids and individuals on the spectrum don't understand that. And again, like you said, it's genuine. They're not trying to hurt you, right? Where we might feel that we're being hurt, they're just labeling, or they're just noticing, or they're just, saying something like, again, like you were saying, maybe they don't like your blouse and they don't want you to wear that, because maybe other people think it's ugly. So they're being nice by saying, "That's an ugly blouse. You shouldn't wear that." Yes. Now, that might be very hurtful for us. Yes. But in their mind, it's like, she shouldn't wear that because other people might not like her. Right?
So I do think that intentions... Yeah, I'm sorry, Vince, I cut you off. But I do think that intentions are important, and knowing where the person is coming from. And I don't know, for both of you, but I have friends that I know that are good friends, but I know that like one friend is not good in crisis. Like they're just not the person I would lean into for a crisis, but they're really good at other things, and I love them and adore them, but I accept the fact that they're not good in a crisis. And when I'm in a crisis, I don't go to them and go, "Hey, I need your help," because I know that they get shut down. I don't think we're talking about those kinds of things. I think that, we need to accept people for who and what they are. But if somebody it's just like that Annie Lennox song, where she says, "Walking on broken glass." There's a line in it when she says, "Because if you really want to hurt me, then there's nothing left to lose." And if somebody really wants to hurt you, if they understand that hurts you, and then they go, "Well, I want to do that because it hurts you," then we get into boundary land. I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're trying to determine in all relationships is who genuinely wants to be with you and have the intent to be a good friend, a good a lover, a good spouse, a good boyfriend and girlfriend. And then those who are there to hurt you for their own personal need or their own personal gain. There's lots of people out there, and I hate to say it, that get positively reinforced by hurting others. Now, it's absolutely terrible. And I can go into, psychological reasons why they do that, but those are the people we don't want in our lives. Those are the people we want to make sure we have a very solid boundary, that they're on the other side dealing with their own stuff, not hurting us for their own need. Because you're right, our biggest weakness is if we continue to let people in that are hurting us, with no intention of loving us.
So
Right.
this becomes, I'm sorry, you talk, Nancy, because I'm hogging the time.
Then it's important to teach our kids social cues that make them aware of the various types of relationships and friendships, so they know when they get a block like that they avoid those types of relationships.
Right. And again, all the different levels, right? We're talking from, or ages, we're talking from your youngest 2, 3, 4-year-olds up to your teens. So it's going to be a little bit socially different in each developmental stage. But absolutely. And this is an ongoing lesson. This isn't something that you teach at elementary school and we leave it be, right? This is something that as parents and clinicians, we want to continue to teach them as social relationships become more complex. As they move on and move up, we have to reteach what are we looking for in the friendship? What are we looking for in an intimate relationship, right? If we're looking at early kids, we're talking about kids that share, kids that enjoy the same thing, kids that play without being mean, kids that include rather than exclude, right? And we're looking at those different facets. When we move into teenagers, young adults, now we're getting into more of those nuances of what they say, how they say it, how, are they genuinely interested in the things that you are? Do they listen to your interests and opinions, or is it all about the things that they're interested in and things like that? So this, this concept, and I'm glad, that you guys have brought this up, is something that's an ongoing relationship or an ongoing learning experience for individuals on the spectrum, because our social relationships are constantly changing. They're constantly getting more complex. Even now, when we go from young adults to middle age, our middle age relationships are different than they were when we were in our 20s, right? They're more mature and more understanding, and that will change again as we move into our later years. So this isn't something that is learned one time. It's not something that's just learned. It's an ongoing learning experience. And us as parents and clinicians have to remember that. We have to remember that this is something that we want to continually support our friends on the spectrum.
Well, I want to go one more than that, Vince, because I think, I get an opportunity to talk to a lot, as you do, to a lot of caregivers, parents of individuals on the spectrum, and other people. They're not all parents, but they're caregivers. And I think, and Nancy, you can attest to this too, I think we go through this just as much. And when we have a child who's on the autism spectrum, sometimes it puts some of our friendships a little bit in a rocky place, that I am not friends with all the people that I came into this journey with, because some of them, like, it just didn't jive. Like, there were people who had a really hard time with what my new life looked like that was centered around my son's treatment. And they had opinions about that and things that they wanted me to do instead of that involved things for them. And they really couldn't accept it. And some of them were family members, some of them were friends. And I hear this from caregivers all the time. Nancy, are you friends with some friends? I retained and I cherish them, but some friends went by the wayside.
Yeah, some friendships did not develop and mature in the ways that others did. And I couldn't be as honest with some of those people.
Yeah, it's almost like some friends that were like really good friends kind of got moved to another level because it was like, I really can't share what I'm going through with you because it's not like, and no, through no fault of theirs, but they just weren't in a place to like hear it and be supportive.
Right.
For whatever reasons, not
Right.
necessarily, anything bad, but I had one friend who would not accept that my child had a diagnosis.
Right.
He just couldn't. And listen, I know that what it was that he did not want that for me.
Mm-hmm.
In the fairy tale in his head, he was like, no, you finally got to be a mom. You don't have a child on the autism spectrum. But it was painful to be around him because he would disavow absolutely everything that we were doing. And he would go, you need to stop that. He doesn't have autism. He's fine. And then he would treat my child in a way that was not appropriate. And we would, like he would make fun of something that he didn't understand. And we would go over here. Let's talk about this. Don't do that. And he'd be like, no, you just got to toughen him. It didn't work. It didn't last. We were done.
And some
I
people
think
don't have that bandwidth, right? They don't have that bandwidth to understand the depth of what we as parents go through, right? In that you guys go through with having a child on the spectrum. It's not something that anyone can really understand unless they're in it. And sometimes they just, like you said, they don't want to hear the bad. They don't want to hear the ugly. They don't want to hear the struggle and the strive that needs to be done. They want to live in the Pollyanna, it'll be fine. And I think that's for their own need. I think that's for their own anxiety. It makes them feel better because, like you said, if it's coming from a good place, they don't want you to suffer. So they're trying to just kind of keep it positive. But that actually, as you're mentioning, can be more damaging than good.
Yeah, and it's coming from a place like I know they didn't mean any malice, right? But it's coming from a place that they meant well, but sometimes even meaning well doesn't fit in your life.
Right.
But I think that boundaries are one of the hardest things on the face of the planet. I'm in a place where I'm wanting to make sure that I'm teaching that to my son, but I really got to check myself because I don't think I'm good at boundaries. And I got to be honest, Vince, I know a lot of women who say the same thing. Do you feel like it's men also, and I'm just only talking to the women, or do only women talk about it, or is it more women?
No, I think it's both, but it's demonstrated in different ways, right? When we're talking about social boundaries, we're talking about an infinite amount of different types of boundaries, right? We have boundaries in relationships, boundaries in intimacy. We have boundaries with knowledge that we share. We have, all different types of boundaries. And I think men and women experience and show boundaries in many different ways, right? Where you're saying that, women more or loose boundaries and trying to maintain friendships, but I think on the men's side, I think men put up too strong of boundaries oftentimes, too quickly, right? It's their self-defense to protect them. Me mad, me no hurt. And those boundaries come up very quickly where they're not willing to listen. They're not willing to feel. They're not willing to, as we were saying, go to the depths of understanding what this really means, what it really means to have a child, a friend, a lover on the spectrum, right? So I see that boundaries are difficult for both men and women. It's just displayed a little bit differently.
Nancy, are you good at boundaries?
Not as good as I want to be. Vince, how do we teach our kids how to deal with rejection?
Mm-hmm. The first thing, well, depending on the type of rejection, right? I mean, anytime we're teaching rejection is understanding why it was rejected and accepting it. I think one of the things that we try to do is, right, we want to protect our kids and we want to, stop the hurting as quickly as we can, right? I think that's every parent. But sometimes I think we might be doing a misservice if we're doing that too quickly because we want them to understand the rejection and that it hurts, and because it hurts, this is maybe why we want to be better at selecting our friends, looking at the friends, not chasing that bully, not chasing that guy or girl that really doesn't like us, and really showing them that this is a part of relationships. that we're all experiencing. It's not you, Wyatt. It's not you, Jem. It's not you, Nancy, Shannon, Vince, right? Everybody will at some point be faced with rejection and be rejected. It's why were we rejected? Let's look at it, break it apart. Why was it? Is it something that we did, something we can change, something we can do differently next time? Sometimes we do everything right and it's the other person and we say, okay, that person just didn't want me or didn't want to be my friend or didn't want to participate in my activity. And we say, it's okay to hurt. It's okay to be sad because that we thought they were friends. But once that sadness feels a little better, now we're going to look for new friends. Right now, the positive part comes in. Now we look for other people. We look for people that want to do the same activities or want to share or want to love. Right. So it's, again, as we were saying, a circle of friends. It's definitely an ongoing teaching. It's not something that we can teach just off of one or two rejections, because as the social complexity of the relationships change, it's going to change. But my very first thought is not trying to dismiss the feeling, except, we want to feel the feeling and know why we're feeling the feeling. Does that make sense?
That's really hard.
Yeah.
I think it's great advice, Vince, but it's like I'm just picturing, it's hard, right, Nancy? Because
Right.
to see our kids hurting.
Yes.
I mean, I think I'm not going to speak for you, Nancy, but tell me how you feel. I just want to go up to the other kids and go, would it kill you to be nice? Like I want to. That's what I want to do, but that's not fruitful.
Right.
Because then they'll be nice in front of you, but then what happens when you leave?
Right.
Oh, well, sometimes now they're not even nice in front of you.
Right.
They just, there are some in this world that we're in right now. I long for some aspects of the time period when Temple Grandin's mom, Eustacia Cutler, she says, the thing is that it was very clear to us in the post-World War II era that we all had to band together. And that when you were in a community, everybody's kids were a part of the tribe and they came with whatever they came and everyone had to accept them. That was what we were taught in school, in work, and in our places of worship, was that everybody had a place at the table and that your kid had to be nice to everyone. They didn't necessarily have to be best friends, but they had to be polite to everyone. And now we've gained other things. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to go back to previous eras, but we have lost teaching civility to little kids, to up through teenagers, to just be nice to people. You don't have to, be best friends and trade necklaces, but be nice, be a human being.
Right.
And it's sad.
Well, so many times I think in the world today, our kids don't see modeling for that, for being kind. What they're seeing, particularly in the political world, which is the news of that is everywhere. They're seeing an uncivility.
Yes, I absolutely agree.
Yeah,
I absolutely agree. But I do love what you're saying, Vince, is that we have to allow them to feel their feelings. I think so often people will say, stop crying, get over it, suck it up. And yes, Marisol says have manners, but that comes from the home.
Right.
I think it's got to come from all sides.
Well, I was going to follow up with what Marisol was saying. Same thing, right? We are the biggest models. Our home is the biggest models of what we want our kids to look for and what we want our kids. So if we're being unkind, maybe not to our kids, but we're being unkind to others, or we're letting this political, landscape affect us, and we're yelling at the TV, or we're upset, or we're in the corner, complaining about things, right? Our kids see this, right? So we want to make sure that we're being kind, compassionate, understanding, the best that we can. Doesn't mean we don't get mad from time to time, of course. But remember, the biggest, role model that our kids have are us.
Well, that's a very good point, Vince, and I take it very to heart because just 10 minutes before this show started, I was standing in my living room yelling at the TV. So I will work on that. Yes, because I was like, and I may or may not have said a few swear words. Just saying. Marisol says, but we have a big challenge, social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Yes, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. But you're right, Marisol, it starts at home. Unfortunately, you guys, we're totally out of time. Vince, we so appreciate you, and we know this is a tough topic, but we so appreciate you waiting in. You gave us a lot to think about. Thank you for being with us. Happy Valentine's Day to you.
Happy Valentine's Day, Vince.
And to your lovely wife and your fabulous family. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, ladies. Love you both.
Thank you, Vince. Bye-bye. And Nancy, happy Valentine's Day to you. I'm going to see you next week, okay?
Happy Valentine's Day to you and your family, Shannon. And we wish all of our viewers a very happy Valentine's Day.
Yes, we do. We'll see you next week. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me.
And give yourselves a hug from me.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching Autism Live. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.